Welcome to the Relationships Inside Out podcast with Doctors Gregory Siebert and Kimberly Murray, licensed marriage and family therapists. Join them on this journey as they explore the ins and outs of relationships.
Well, welcome to Relationships Inside Out, where today we're going to talk about why we shouldn't stay together in our relationship for a child.
We often, as couples therapists, families therapists, hear couples say, and I'm going to say divorced. Please know that when I say divorced, it doesn't just mean married. It means any committed partnership with kids.
Yeah.
But I hear, and I'm sure you do, partners say, well, we can't get divorced because we have children, or I'm only staying for the children. And while an altruistic sentiment, it is actually often worse off for the kids and most certainly for the partners to choose that path.
Yeah, and it's for a couple of reasons. One reason is because of what the child or children witness.
Yeah.
So if there's tension or resentment, even if it's not talked about, right? This is like a cloud hanging over the family.
The vibe.
Kids pick up on this.
They feel it.
Right? They feel it. And it creates an environment where maybe emotions aren't safely expressed.
Yeah.
It may lead to like more hypersensitivity to negative emotions because they're constantly in this state of tension. And they also learn from this that's modeled is that we need to stay in this relationship, even though we're constantly fighting and not work on it. And this is how we resolve conflict and a bunch of really unhealthy relationship dynamics.
Parents say, at least from my clients I've worked with, have said, well, we don't fight in front of the kids so it doesn't impact them. I want us to think about infancy research. We know that infants, whether you are verbally expressing or not, pick up on your stress, your tension, your anxiety. And babies that are around parents who are more stressed, anxious, even if not verbalizing, even if not yelling, throwing things, are often more cranky, even more prone to colic.
Yeah.
They tend to be more irritated babies. That doesn't go away as kids get older. In fact, kids get more perceptive.
Yeah.
So my partner and I may think like, we've got this under lock, right? We don't fight in front of our kids. But if we're walking around and there's that vibe, and you guys know what I'm talking about.
Holding hands, maybe not showing affection.
No eye contact.
Little things.
Split speech.
Yeah.
And again, that energy, especially if you're someone who's energy perceptive, it absolutely impacts your children.
And the other part of this is that if it creates stress, increased stress, it's likely to increase the cortisol levels, the stress hormone in children. And research has shown that that has implications long-term on the brain, even the brain structure. And it could affect like learning and physical development. It also is predictive of mental health issues later down the road. And so why we think it's helpful, it actually has some pretty negative consequences depending on the severity.
Some big risk.
Big.
It also informs how they pick their partnerships. If my partnership is contentious, is distant, that's what my kids see modeled as a normal or healthy relationship. So ask yourself, what if this was my child? Would I want them in this type of marriage? You're probably saying like, no, of course not. But if you're modeling it, that increases the risk, the likelihood that your child will engage in the same type of partnership when they're older.
Or if my parents did this, or if they didn't, would I have wanted them to stay together? Or if my parents stayed together through this, what would have been like if they didn't? And by not staying together, you're also modeling what it's like to resolve, in a healthy way, of course. If that's feasible. There's a lot of separations that are not healthy, and that models something different and also reinforces to the kids, you shouldn't be together. But modeling how to resolve it. And then if you're the parent in this process, even if some of that resentment's been there and you have been staying together for a little while, you can always repair with the child. You can always get down on their level and talk with them about what's going on and even apologize for what they've been experiencing or might be experiencing. Is because as much as we try to hide this from kids, we think that they don't know. Come on, we were kids and we knew, right? We were all kids and we knew.
And we hear people say that sense of like, my parents should have gotten divorced. They didn't, but they should have.
Yeah.
You don't want to be in that position when your kids are older and say, Mom or Dad, why'd you stay? This is even more complicated by abuse. And we're not going to dive too heavy into that.
Yeah.
Because with abuse comes greater risk of leaving, comes much, much greater magnitude of risks to physical safety, mental safety of
Mhm.
the opposite partner and the kids. But that is included in here, right? If there is abuse and you're modeling that, your kids are much more likely to enter into a relationship where that occurs.
Yeah. And they might think it's normal
Yeah.
that I stay together with someone I don't like,
That's mean to me.
that I hate, that's mean to me. Or, yeah, I mean,
Even like when I say mean, I don't just mean abuse. I mean, short clip with me, doesn't help me as a partnership, tells me to just go do whatever, right? Isn't engaged with me as a loving partnership.
Mhm.
I tell parents all the time, divorce is not what hurts kids. It's not. We know that in research. The actual act of divorce is not what hurts children. What hurts children is the tension in the partnership before, during, and after divorce.
Yeah.
If parents are amicable through those processes, there's a transition. So there is a slight impact on kiddo, but it is not this world-shattering thing that we think of.
Mhm.
It is all about the partnership that occurs
Mhm.
before, during, and after.
Well, and there's this cultural narrative, and that varies between cultures, but this narrative of kids should have two parents, and I'm going to be taking that away from them because I want to leave.
An intact family.
And they need an intact family.
Yeah.
They're going to have a lot of behavioral problems. Well, they're going to have behavioral problems if parents are together and there's a lot of toxicity.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're experiencing these negative emotions and depending on their developmental age, don't have the tools to resolve this. So you might see them act out at school, which could be being tardy at school. It doesn't necessarily have to be, getting in trouble because they're throwing stuff at school or
Bullying,
things like that. And so thinking about that narrative and where does that come from, that I have to stay with an intact family, because the child is much better long-term with one happy parent, a single happy parent household, than it is with parents who stay together with high conflict.
100%. And we know that post-COVID, the divorce rate reached over 50%.
Because none of us could live with our partners? Is that?
Don't get me started. But we know that went over 50%. So this belief of my kid is going to be ostracized. They're going to be the weird kid. They're going to go through bullying. The fact is that 50% likely of their peers, give or take, at least in the United States, are also in split households. It is not, there was a previous point in US history in which it was fairly uncommon for divorce. That's not the case now.
Yeah.
Now it's common. So the idea of mom's house, dad's house, in the case of a heterosexual couple, is not that weird, right? It's actually really common in the classroom.
And the part of it shouldn't be the question of, or the thought of, I need to keep my kids together. The thought should be, what is the best outcome for my child?
100%.
How do I reduce these negative emotions that they're experiencing on a greater level? How do I improve their happiness and well-being? And that may not be staying with an intact family. And that shouldn't take priority, this idea of staying in an intact family, because there's a lot of religious pull on this.
Oh, absolutely. Or cultural.
And I'm shitting. So I'm shitting on all of the people who might have this background and belief system around that. Is it does more harm to kids staying together. So a question, or think about it for yourself, is how important is it then to abide by this cultural expectation? If my kid long-term is going to be susceptible to potential like developmental delays, hypersensitive to negative emotions down the road, depression, anxiety, other mental health disorders, and also a poor understanding of what it's like to have a healthy relationship.
And maybe you're sitting here saying, but I'll say from a Christian belief, biblically, divorce is not supported. Some would say that there are caveats to that. If you are one that believes that there isn't any caveats to that, and you're sitting there saying, but my values are that important. Okay. Then we've got to get in some pretty intensive couples therapy.
Yep.
Or do something to mitigate those risks, because identifying in a certain religion or culture is not going to buffer against those risks to kids. We see this across religions, across racial groups, across ethnic groups. It isn't just these risks aren't just for people who don't identify with your faith or your culture. I want to be really explicit about that. So if it is a value to stay, okay, great. And what are you going to actively do about it? Because letting it just continue as the way it is That's the concern.
Yeah. And that's a good point, is if it is a priority to you, that value, then that should drive another approach. Because even though the session is about not staying together for the kids, if that's not a question for you, then couples therapy is extremely, extremely important. The tough thing is everyone has to buy into it.
And some relationships, unpopular opinion here, are irreparable.
Yes.
We think that every marriage can be saved. And some marriage therapists even hold that belief. I'm not one of them. Some marriages have a certain flavor of toxicity or wounding that has happened that it can't always be repaired in a healthy way.
So I believe all marriages can be saved, not necessarily marriage by legal, but just, couples.
Relationship,
Yeah.
sure.
But not because of me, but because of where they're doing it or what they're doing or what they've done and where they're willing to go. If they're not willing to put in the work equally, I mean, this is why it's so difficult. A lot of people are like, well, couple therapy didn't work for us. Where both people bought in. Were you doing the work outside?
That's the key, right? Were you doing the tools consistently?
Yeah.
Were you going to a quality therapist?
You might have to change up. Yeah.
Were you in the right fit of therapist for you? There's so many variables here. So just because you choose not to stay together, I want to say, doesn't mean you gave up. It doesn't mean you're less than. It doesn't mean any of that. But if you choose to stay together, if you choose to work on it, you have to commit. Otherwise, your kids are at the risk of all the things we just detailed, regardless of your identities.
Yeah. And commit does not mean necessarily forgetting. It means I'm committing to repairing and working towards repair. And that might be a lifelong journey, depending on what that is. Or maybe I'll use the and language. And it takes a lot of work. This isn't going in and you learn communication skills and now you're better. This isn't going
years sometimes.
This isn't going in and looking at your partner and figuring out how they can change. You have to look at yourself. You got to figure out your side and role in the relationship and what you can change, because that's really all you have control over. And you changing or having to change or adapt things that works well with your partner, that may be changing communication style. It may be changing how you process stress with your partner, or exhibit it throughout the house, like slamming things or something. That does not mean you're the problem. Both people are the problem. The relationship's not working.
And I want to say again for the people in the back, you are not in control of your partner.
Stop trying to change them.
If you think, if I could just change my partner, if I could just fix this thing, if they would just, then it would be okay. Nope, you can't change them. And that's why things like divorce occur, right? I can't change my partner. My partner, I can't tolerate this space. It's feeling conflictual. So I'm going to choose separation, divorce, breakup, whatever it might be. That is an option, right? And sometimes it is most definitely the healthiest option for the whole unit.
And when we talk about working on a relationship, we're talking about repairing. And some partners have the idea that repair is only if their partner does X.
Oof.
So you're putting your health of the relationship contingent upon a partner who may, have already caused hurt in some way. What role do you have in helping that repair? Right? If your walls are up and not allowing that and nothing works, and you're always engaging in confirmation bias, always finding the reasons of why it shouldn't work.
Never forgive and let go.
Yes.
Huge one.
Yeah. And we're kind of focused on the relationship now, but that's because this is the primary focus when we think about kids. Yep. And when we're thinking about staying together or not, or if we are staying together, working towards it with a certified or licensed therapist, it is, what impact does it have on our kids? How are they going to suffer from this? And we talk about staying together for the kids is not a good reason because of the consequences that we listed. And a lot of people, as you said earlier, think that we need this intact family. And we're here to say that's not true. So take that off the table and then reassess what is the best for your kids.
I'll talk to partners who are on that cusp point of getting divorced. And they'll say, things like, I want to stay. And I'll say, why? And they'll say, because I want to be married. And I'll say, do you want to be married to Bob, the partner? Or do you just want to be married? Oh, to Bob. Why? Tell me about that. If you can't go through that mental exercise and have things you identify as why this is a healthy, fulfilling, good relationship, I challenge you to think about, okay, do you want to fix it? And if not, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
This slide versus decide, we've talked about it before, of you can slide into decisions where things happen by inertia. They just happen, or we can make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
This requires a decision. I'm either deciding to put in the work to change it, or I'm deciding that it's too far gone that I don't want to change it.
Yeah.
Either way, you've got to decide and make a choice forward, because these kids are impacted whether you stay or go if there is tension, toxicity, abuse,
Mhm.
violence, anger, any of that
Mhm.
impacts kids.
And think about for yourself because a lot of times when we're going through this, we tell ourselves we're failing. We failed.
Yep.
Find out what you need to make sure that you've tried everything if should you decide to divorce, that you know that
Absolutely.
unequivocally, like this would not have worked. I gave my best. Figure out where that point is for you. I hear clients say a lot of times like, well, I love them. I want to stay together. Great. Love is a very subjective construct.
100%.
It's largely used in Western cultures as like one of the top things of why we are with somebody. Some other cultures, it's not. There's a lot of other things in place, like logistics and status and
Finances.
And so take love, for example. Okay, love is the reason why you're staying there. What behaviors are you going to change to actually represent this love that you say you have for them? And I'll see partners engage in behaviors that they just go back to. And it's like, well, that's not showing your partner respect and love. You're controlling them. You're absolutely engaging in emotional abuse and controlling them. And like, that's not love.
It's not love. And your kids are watching that.
This is complex. We won't get into it. However, the difficult piece about that is that partner might have grown up in a family where they didn't get separated, and that for them, that is love. And so like, well, this is normal. This is my family. Well,
and then it's transgenerational patterns.
Yep.
Of what can be shitty relationships, because that's what I saw. So that's the partner I'm attracted to, because that's like my parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my mom tolerated it, so I should probably tolerate it because it'd be weak if I didn't, or whatever narrative. And it just keeps happening over and over and over again. My hope with having greater awareness of mental health in the world, to include the United States culture, is that we're also giving ourselves permission to make different decisions. We're giving ourselves permission to change transgenerational traumas, transgenerational patterns that don't serve a healthy lifestyle. This is one of them.
And it takes stepping back in the day-to-day grind and all the stress that we're trying to deal with, and give yourself space to observe your life. Where are you at now? What are your values? Are they at play here? What's working? What's not working? Where do you want to be? Because you have one life, and you have control over where you want to go with it, how you want to spend it, who you want to spend it with.
Sure.
I mean, there's people who change careers every 10 years. There's other people that's just, I can't change a career. I'm too old. There's so many narratives that drive what we decide, and being able to step back, understand where those narratives come from, what's driving them. Is that important? What does that mean about me? Like really, this is a very complex discussion that we're having, because there's so many pieces here that we've brought up of how to stay together or not stay together, and things we need to think about if we're going to leave, things we need so we don't have like fear we didn't give everything, which it comes up so much.
And it's not lost on us that we're talking about it freely, like it should be easy. It's not easy, right? Yeah. We're thinking about finances. We have to think about parenting schedules. We have to think about holidays, losing time with my kids developing. How are we going to handle sports? How are we going to handle all the things, right? My partner does do gardening work, so now I'm going to have to take that on top of everything else, whatever.
It is stressful.
It is so stressful and complicated. And you are the only one that can choose, is going through a divorce, separation, breakup worth that potential additional stress for the trade of emotional peace or not? Maybe it's not worth it.
And potential long-term consequences on the kids if you stay together.
Right? Maybe it's not worth it. Maybe you make that choice. I challenge anyone who's listening, who's kind of in this process, to then say, like, I am choosing to stay and know the risks. Say it out loud.
Yeah.
Hear yourself radically accept your circumstances. Often in our culture, we get into this like venting stage where we say, like, I can't do this anymore. And then nothing changes. Or I've had enough and nothing changes.
Yeah.
And if we radically shift that to, this is toxic as hell, and I'm still going to choose it tomorrow, ooh, that hits a little different. Or I know my kids are witnessing us fight every day. I know I'm putting them at greater risk, and I'm still going to choose that tomorrow.
Yeah.
Woof.
A question that we kind of alluded to earlier, and we said in previous episodes, an important one that I find is, if this was somebody that you loved, absolutely loved, would do anything for, and they were in your situation, what would you tell them?
And you deserve what they deserve.
Yes.
Probably wouldn't say stay.
Depending, right? Yeah.
Maybe you'd say, okay, we got to work through it, right? You have a duty to marriage or whatever it might be. So help them get the resources. That's what you would do. So you got to help yourself get the resources. But staying as it is, it puts kids at risk, no matter the age. I'm not just talking about school age, middle, high school. I'm talking about your 6-month-old. I'm talking about your 17-year-old, right? Any point in that span even can impact adult children. They come home for Christmas.
20-year-old. I mean,
mom and dad are at each other's throats.
Yeah. Prefrontal cortex doesn't even fully solidify until mid to late 20s.
Right.
So the brain is still developing, and there is a lot of opportunity for increased cortisol in the brain, which then, as we talked about earlier, leads to a lot of other potential issues and concerns, both physically and mentally.
Absolutely. This is complicated.
You know, earlier you said, this isn't easy. And I'm like, well, everyone is sitting on the outside telling that partner that telling their friend they should leave. They think it's easy. Just leave.
Just leave.
It's not.
It's not.
But what interesting enough is thinking about, why are they saying that? If you're getting that narrative around, think about that and where that's at. And the other thing that's interesting about this conversation to me is that misconception that staying together and intact is better for children than not. That's a big misconception. And that
100%.
thought that staying together is healthier for children is far more popular.
It is. And I sometimes think, maybe unpopular opinion, I think sometimes people leverage that as an excuse to not create change because change is uncomfortable. I think people genuinely believe that. And I do think it's over leveraged in a lot of ways. And I'm going to point it out again. Staying together when your relationship is unhealthy is not better for your children. Unequivocally is not better for your children.
And you deserve to be happy. Your kids deserve to live in an environment that's free of stress to a large degree. I mean, granted, it can't be perfect, but this is something we have control over. And again, I want to reiterate, you deserve to be happy.
1000%. Both of you do. Even if you hate your spouse still deserves to be happy, just like anybody else.
It just may be. I mean, because in relationships earlier on, it might have worked because of who you were at that time. As we grow and our personality shifts and changes as life events happen, you might grow apart. Values might change. That's okay. You are not failing. And that's actually very common, probably one of the predominant things I see when people grow apart. But that happens.
How am I going to tell my family they're going to be so disappointed in me? How am I going to tell my friends they're going to judge me? All of these pieces. And again, easy for me to say, but someone else's judgment is not worth your unhappiness. And so examining if that seems to be taking more weight, right? Avoiding judgment than my own mental health. If that's taking more weight, I want you to examine why. Where does that come from? Is it coming from personal insecurity, lack of self-worth, narratives you had growing up? Is it coming from fear, job status, economic status?
Losing support. I've had couples where they are disconnected from their family and the only family they have is their in-laws. So this is not easy for very reasons that we've just mentioned. If you need support, you might do individual therapy to kind of process this, and discernment therapy if your partner doesn't want to be involved. Or if they do, excellent, go to couples therapy. And I know a lot of people go to their church for counselors, and that's fine. That's an avenue too. Also consider a licensed therapist
licensed couples therapist who has training in this. There are lots of therapists that hang their shingle on, I do couples therapy, but they don't have any actual training. Please make sure someone is actually trained in this before they speak on this.
Yeah. And an easy way to identify this is if their license is LMFT, Licensed Marriage Family Therapist. And it's not they're certified in marriage or trained in marriage. It's trained in systems. And so much more equipped to deal and understand how the system is working together, and they're treating the relationship and not each partner. There's a big distinction there in couple partners who aren't, or therapists who aren't trained in that, typically will work with the individuals. And you see this, right? As I was training master's students. The difference in that distinction.
And other types of therapists don't have the same systemic training in their like master's program, but they might have sought it out after. So if they aren't an LMFT, ask them what trainings they have received.
Yep.
How long have they been working with couples? What methods do they use? Don't be shy to really dig. This is your marriage, your family.
Mm-hmm. You're interviewing us.
Go for the big one, right? Go for the one that fits you.
I'm biased to LMFT, but go ahead, Kim. You can say what you want to say. LMFT only.
But really be picky. And at the core, finding a therapist, credentials and all of that aside, is good fit. If you don't feel comfortable or your partner doesn't feel comfortable with them, find another one.
Yep.
Move along. You can fire them session 1, session 5, session 15. Whenever they're not a good fit, it doesn't mean that couples therapy isn't a good fit. It means maybe that therapist wasn't a good fit.
And I know that's hard because you're breaking up with a therapist to find one about breaking up. So
and your therapist will be okay. Everyone's afraid of hurting their therapist's feelings. It's not about their feelings. It's about yours.
I mean, it is about mine. Kidding. I'm awful.
But at the core, you have a choice to make. Don't slide, decide.
Mm-hmm.
A choice. Am I going to stay, tolerate the bullshit, and know the risks to my kid? Am I going to stay and actively choose a different avenue, therapy, whatever it might be? Or am I going to choose to leave? Either way, you've got a choice to make and you've got accountability to take. Accountability for you and for your children.
And we have an ethical obligation to not work outside of our competency. Mm-hmm. And so if we ever come across like the dynamic and that we're like, yeah, I haven't worked with that, I'm not skilled in that, it's best that we refer.
Sure.
And that's totally okay. You're going to find that some have different skills, different styles. I'm more blunt. I have some frameworks I work from. Kim, you have your own. Mm-hmm. Some are very different than us. I think you and I are very similar in styles. We have some distinctions, but there's just different styles. They're people. This is somebody you're gonna be working with, and they're gonna be working with you as a team, a collaborative. I mean, at least that's my perspective of the role of a therapist, is collaborative. And so it is very, very important that you find someone that you can be vulnerable with and you feel comfortable with. You feel comfortable making mistakes in front of, and even sharing some of the vulnerable pieces where maybe you weren't the best self. And I guarantee you that therapist has also had a very similar not best of self moment too.
My hope, if you choose to stay with knowledge of how it impacts your kids, is that your partner is willing to engage. If they're not willing to engage, explore how you move through that, right? My hope is they do go to couples therapy. My hope is that you get to choose your joy, your kids' joy, your emotional safety, regardless of how you choose to move forward.
Yes.
This has been Relationships Inside Out, where today we talked about why we don't just stay together for the kids. It's got to be more than that, right? It's got to be healthy. And we've got to want to be with that particular person, not just married or in a relationship.
Values.
Yes.
Might be driving it.
As always, if anyone has any questions, feedback, topic suggestions, please feel free to email us at relationshipsinsideout@gmail.com. Thanks.
Thanks.